Hello and welcome to another lockdown edition of the TF1 show. I'm your host, Tines Ferreira, the hamster that keeps the wheel of F1 podcasting turning. Now, it's been a bit of a dry spell, obviously, over the last couple of weeks. But I don't know if you guys have been watching the F1 drivers online, whether you've been watching their streams on Twitch. For those geriatrics that, and I guess I can include myself in this, a couple of weeks ago, that don't know what Twitch is. Twitch is a website where you can go watch other people play video games. Now, I'm going to be honest, I've never really had the deep desire within me to watch other people play video games, but it's turned out to be quite beneficial to the world of Formula One entertainment, where we've seen a lot of F1 drivers playing the Formula One game and other versions of sort of online racing games, and they've been streaming it to the outside world. And I have to say it's been quite entertaining from my perspective. Whether the whole esports thing is a legitimate way of going racing is another question for another day. Go listen to my previous podcast with Sasha to get quite strong views on what esports is supposed to be and whether it's a good racing format. But what I have found very entertaining is just watching the young drivers interact online, because they're all connected via the internet and they can all talk to each other via their headsets. So listening to guys like George Russell, Lando Norris, Charles Leclerc, Alex Albon, listening to all of them interact and just joke around while racing is actually quite entertaining, and also quite nice to see that they can be friends and they actually do get along quite well. So if you haven't watched one of their Twitch streams yet, maybe go and have a look. I think Leclerc Norris is a very famous Twitch streamer, and George Russell I think also streams, so go and have a look at that. And I guess this sort of leads into what I wanted to discuss today, and what today's main topic of conversation is going to be, and that is, and I've titled this episode, The Other Young Stars in F1. Now, obviously, it's been widely spread, it's been widely talked about that the two big stars for tomorrow, or the next generation of Formula One stars, that's those. They are probably going to be named Max Verstappen and Charles Leclerc, and especially during the last season, we've heard lots and lots of different opinions about how we're going to be watching Leclerc and Verstappen battle it out for many years to come, and that it's going to be a fascinating time and period in the sport. But that got me thinking the other day just about, the other very, very experienced, very talented, very well decorated young drivers in F1 that have sort of been overlooked in a way by the media, just because of the fact that they haven't really had the opportunity to compete for race wins or compete for pole positions and things like that. So I wanted to take today's episode and just spend some time talking about 4 other drivers and 4 other contemporaries of Leclerc and Verstappen that have achieved, I guess, almost, or if not just as much as these two stars in the lower categories in F1, and to maybe have a think about, who they are as drivers and what their strengths and weaknesses potentially are. And I want to go straight into who is probably, I think, not the most promising, but as the most glowing CV out of the young guns, with the exception obviously of Verstappen and Leclerc, and that is George Russell. Now, George Russell is the same age as Charles Leclerc, and I think is a year older than Lando Norris, but he essentially has basically won everything that there is to win in the lower categories. He won the GP3 championship and the Formula 2 championship in his rookie seasons, in basically each of these a year after that. Leclerc won both of these as well. And just the fact that he won the Formula 2 championship as a rookie means he's in very, very stylish and experienced company. Since the only other drivers to have done that are Nico Rosberg in 2005, Lewis Hamilton in 2006, Nico Hülkenberg in 2009, and then lastly Charles Leclerc in 2016. So, apologies, in 2017. So that already is a very, very big feather in George Russell's cap to be able to say that he's one of the few drivers that was able to win the Formula 2 championship in his rookie season. And as we can see in the past, it does tend to work out quite well for them. Maybe with the exception of Nico Hulkenberg, that was never able to really reach the potential that we all knew he had. But that in itself just shows that George Russell is actually a serious driver, and that he has basically won every championship that is entered, I guess, with the exception of European Formula 3, where both him and Leclerc was never able to really win the championship there. So I think as a driver, from what I can see, and I think especially with Russell, it's been very, very difficult to actually see in Formula 1 now how good he really is, or how good he can be, because of the fact that the one season he has been in Formula 1, he was in a Williams that was so far behind everybody else that it was basically impossible to really, come up with a sort of a yardstick for how good George Russell truly is. So he's probably the driver that I think nobody really knows his capabilities or the extent of his talent. And I have a sneaking suspicion that as soon as he gets into a relatively decent car, he's going to start causing a lot of problems for a lot of drivers. I think he's a very cerebral driver. He seems to be very smart and very calm in the car and in his approach to, dealing with the team, in setting up the car. The feedback that Williams have given is that he's incredibly good at understanding things in the car and identifying problems in the car. So he might be a very, very strong, asset to a team in terms of car setup and car development. If he does, keep on developing this and maybe has the opportunity to be in a team where they can actually compete for more than just 19th on the grid, I guess. So, George Russell definitely one to look out for. And I think given that he is a Mercedes junior, if he can get into that Mercedes at some point in time, I think the Verstappen and Leclerc show is going to turn into the Verstappen, Leclerc and Russell show very, very quickly. I just think that Verstappen and Leclerc needs to be aware and be afraid of George Russell, because he could be the guy that maybe takes some of those championships away from them in the future. Now, the next guy I want to talk about is a very good friend of George Russell's, and he came second to George Russell in the 2018 Formula 2 Championship, and that is, of course, our favorite internet sensation, Lando Norris. Now, Norris, similar to Russell, has a very, very illustrious junior career. Apparently, Russell's karting career is apparently, I think, along with Max Verstappen's, the most impressive that there's ever been. I, for one, actually don't understand how the different karting categories work and the different karting championships and how they're all, how important they all are relative to each other. So I'm not going to go into the trouble of explaining what he has won, what he hasn't won. It's just widely known that Norris has had an incredibly, incredibly impressive karting career. And then, of course, he won the Formula 3 championship in the same year that Russell won the GP3 championship. Now, for those of you that don't know, a couple of years back, there were sort of two competing feeder series to the Formula 2 championship in GP3 and Formula 3. So some drivers did both, where they first did Formula 3 and then went to GP3. Other drivers just did GP3. Other drivers just did Formula 3. But, be that as it may, Norris won Formula 3 and then immediately was promoted up into Formula 2. We then came second in the championship as he's in his first season, after which he was then promoted into the McLaren Formula 1 team. Now, I think obviously he didn't win Formula 2 like some of his other contemporaries did, but I think Norris has always been a very, very fast driver. I think we've seen how quick he is over qualifying and how he has challenged Carlos Sainz, especially over one lap during the last season. I think he is very aware that he still has experience to build up around maybe race situations. He's obviously been desperately unlucky also over the last season. But I think he's very much a star on the rise as well, and he's the youngest driver out of all of them. I think he's a year younger than Russell and Leclerc. So I think definitely someone to look out for. If McLaren can get their act together, I think Norris and Sainz are going to be a formidable driver pairing, and again can cause lots of problems to the likes of Verstappen and Leclerc. Now, the next guy I want to talk about is the guy that came third in the Formula 2 championship behind George Russell and Lando Norris. So evidently it was a strong driver lineup in that 2018 season of Formula 2. But Alex Albon is already Max Verstappen's teammate after all of the drama last year with Pierre Gasly being demoted and Alex Albon being promoted into the Red Bull Formula 1 team halfway through the season. Now, he's an interesting one because I think compared to the others on this list that I have here, he's probably a bit of a slow burner if it comes to achievements and getting things going in a season, where he does not have the CV of the other drivers, where he hasn't won a GP3 or a Formula 3 or a Formula 2 championship, but he's always been, in the top 3, top 4 positions. He came second to Leclerc in the GP3 championship in the same car, and I think it was a very, very close championship between the two of them, if I'm not mistaken. And then he obviously had a bit of an off season, or not such a great season in the next year in Formula 2, but then bounced back the year thereafter and actually really challenged Norris and Russell right up until the last race for the Formula 2 title. So I think Albon is somebody that takes a bit more time to really get to grips with the car that he has, but once he does, sort things out, he's incredibly fast, very, very good in the race. I think we saw last season, he still had some things to sort out in terms of qualifying with his deficit to Max Verstappen. But in the race pace, he was much, much closer, and actually is very impressive with the way he's decisive in his overtaking and making sure that he's always moving up the field. So I think that's something that's very promising for Albon, and he's probably the guy that I'm most curious to see how he gets on in Red Bull this year, just because I think we might just see the same trend continue with Alex maybe starting a bit slower, but really, really getting to grips with his equipment as time goes on, and ends up being a very serious and competitive driver, which could lead to some fireworks internally in the Red Bull team if both Verstappen and Albon decides to stay on for the next couple of years. Now, the last driver I want to talk about is a driver that's really, he is probably the closest contemporary to Max Verstappen in the sense of he's raced together with Max in the lower categories the most. And they do have a bit of a checkered past, and that is, of course, our favorite French driver, Esteban Ocon. Now, for those of you who don't know, and I'm assuming most of you do, Ocon did not participate in the F1 Championship last year due to him losing out on his seat with Daniel Ricciardo, and it's a whole long shebang. Go watch Drive to Survive Season 1 or go read up on it. But moral of the story, Esteban Ocon wasn't in the F1 Championship in 2019, even though he has been driving in F1 ever since the second half of 2016, where he joined the Manor team, instead of Rio Haryanto back in the day. He was then in the Force India team at that point in 2017 and 2018, where he was let's just say a thorn in Sergio Perez's side. Now, we all know how good Sergio Perez is as a race driver, and let's just say Esteban Ocon was with him all the way throughout those seasons. Even as a rookie at that point in time, he was faster over one lap compared to Sergio Perez. He was giving him all sorts of trouble in the race. And I do feel that Ocon has gotten a bit of an unfair reputation after those 2 years of being somebody that doesn't play the team game, of somebody that upsets the team and doesn't want to really, cultivate a good atmosphere in the team. Because I think Sergio Perez played just as big of a part in that whole situation, where Perez was clearly not happy with the fact that he was being challenged so strongly by this young driver. And I think that just led to some conflict in the team that for some reason Ocon was blamed for. But I do think that both Ocon and Perez are equally to blame in that whole situation. But, I digress. Ocon, maybe is not as well known now after not being in the F1 paddock the last year or so. But he's also a Mercedes junior along with George Russell, or he was. I think he's now fully with Renault. And he actually has quite the glowing junior career as well. And very similar to Verstappen, actually never participated in Formula 2 because he was already pulled up into Formula 1 after having won the GP3 championship. So he's actually skipped Formula 2 completely like Verstappen did to go and drive in Formula 1 for Manor. Now, Ocon won the F3 title over Max Verstappen in 2014. And I know there are people that are going to say no, but Ocon had the better team and the better car. But I think that's a lot of what ifism and whataboutism. Ocon beat Verstappen in Formula 3. And then Ocon graduated into GP3 in 2015 as a rookie, which he won as well. So he's also won the last 2 junior titles that he's competed in and has been in Formula 1 ever since. Now, Ocon, according to me, seems to be very, very fast over one lap. He's a very good qualifier from what we could see over his couple of stints with Force India. He's a very fast race driver as well. He seems to be good in the wet. He can sometimes, I think, still be a bit rash and a bit impulsive, as we saw in his many battles with Sergio Perez, and of course that infamous unlapping overtake that he tried to pull over Verstappen, which obviously illustrated to the world that there really isn't much love lost between them. So I think if Ocon and Renault can get their act together, or if one day we see Ocon and Russell in the Mercedes team, that has the potential to be a very, very explosive championship. If we, in theory, can have Ocon and Russell in Mercedes, Leclerc in Ferrari, Verstappen, Albon in Red Bull, and then Lando Norris and Sainz in a McLaren, all competing for race wins. And I think that would be a fantastic future for Formula 1. And I do hope that we can, have that to look forward to over the next couple of years. Alright, so there is my quick summary of the often forgotten other young stars who are still comprehensively to prove themselves in Formula 1. But I do think they definitely have the pedigree and the achievements behind them. So I think it'll be a joy to see these drivers properly mix it with Leclerc and Verstappen one day. And I also hope it serves as a reminder to the people out there that it's not only going to be the Verstappen and Leclerc show over the next couple of seasons, that they might actually end up winning quite a few less championships than what people are thinking about at the moment, just because of there being, some other really serious talent in the young driver pool at the moment. Alright, that's it for today's episode. I hope you are still all staying safe and that the 2020 season of F1 is just around the corner. In the meantime, you can go and vote on my daily polls on my Twitter account, where I'm currently trying to determine which driver in history is the best qualifier of all. So just go and follow my Twitter account. My handle is @TF1Show to join in on the action. Now I look forward to talking to all of you again soon. Bye.